What is poverty? What demographics are impacted by poverty? What factors or characteristics should be considered in order to accurately measure poverty? These are all questions that need to be asked and answered in order to create a quality definition of poverty. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2018, 38.1 million people fell below the poverty threshold set by the official poverty measure, the OPM. The U.S. Census Bureau breaks down this number into different characteristics such as race, age, gender, and education attainment in order to illustrate the breadth of those impoverished. However, these numbers may be leaving out some people who should be considered impoverished.
The official poverty measure in the United States solely measures poverty on the basis of income. In doing so, this simplistic measure leads the average individual to define poverty simply as economic deprivation. However, poverty is more than just an economic deficit. In reality, poverty can be defined as the combination between economic deprivation and the lack of capabilities, or, in other words, the inability to achieve a certain level of socioeconomic well-being.
Robert Rector, a principal research analyst for the Heritage Foundation, believes that the media and even the OPM portrays poverty as worse than it is. He is of the opinion that when the Census Bureau states that 38.1 million people fell below the poverty threshold, individuals picture people below the threshold as not having access to basic needs, such as food, shelter, and clothing. He argues that this is not true and that people below the line actually possess a lot of different amenities, for instance, televisions and refrigerators. Rector says consumer items that were luxuries or significant purchases for the middle class a few decades ago have become commonplace in poor households. Rector takes the stance that poverty should be defined as the inability to obtain basic needs. However, this definition is very inflexible to changes in society and technology. As society advances, so do individuals' needs. In order for people to have satisfactory food, they might need a refrigerator to store it. Overall, Rector's definition of poverty is very absolute and fails to take into consideration outside factors that impact who is impoverished.
But exactly why is the capabilities approach to measuring poverty a more effective method than the OPM? According to Sen, given the fact that the OPM only takes into account income when measuring poverty, we are unable to accurately assess the breadth of poverty in the U.S. More specifically, Sen discusses income lowness, having an amount of money below a certain level, and income inadequacy, not having enough money. But these metrics leave us questioning how much money is really enough, and enough money for what exactly? Similarly, Martha Nussbaum advocates for the adoption of a qualitative poverty measure. The OPM, as described by John Iceland, is an absolute measure which makes it conceptually easy to understand and intuitively appealing. Nussbaum calls this the fallacy of measurement and supports humanized qualitative measurements rather than absolute quantitative ones. Iceland also points out another major flaw with the OPM, the unit of analysis. By measuring income on a family or household basis, the OPM is subject to misrepresenting poverty in a number of ways. For instance, cohabiting couples may pool their resources together and, consequently, their poverty status can be misconstrued by the OPM.
Imagine if two unmarried individuals lived in the same house and each individual had $12,000 in gross annual income. Separately, these individuals are considered to be impoverished because they make below $12,140. But together, these individuals make $24,000 in gross annual income, which would put them above the $16,460 poverty threshold for a family of two. As you notice, the poverty threshold does not double even though the family size increases from one individual to two. This is because the OPM takes into account families in the same household who utilize the same resources like utilities. But the OPM does not account for unmarried individuals who live together.
In his work entitled Capability and Well-Being, Sen asserts that, since income is not desired for its own sake, any income-based notion of poverty must refer to those basic ends which are promoted by income as means. Essentially, Sen is stating that the income-based OPM is only providing us with a glimpse of the overall issue of poverty, and, in order to view poverty in its entirety, we need to consider the ways in which income is translated into basic capabilities such as proper nourishment and educational opportunities. A Elaborating on the capabilities approach, Nussbaum highlights its evaluative nature, declaring that the approach is not meant to impose certain values on people or create a rigid or resolute hierarchy of such values. The essence of the capabilities approach, as Nussbaum explains, is to determine among the many things that human beings might develop the capacity to do, which ones are the really valuable ones. Essentially, both Sen and Nussbaum are declaring that, while it is true that dollars in pockets matter, poverty is about much more than money. It is about people and their quality of life. Building off of the foundation constructed by Sen, Nussbaum created a list of 10 central capabilities in order to determine what values are fundamental to humans and a high quality of life. According to Nussbaum, this list will help us in answering the question, what does a life worthy of human dignity require? Ranging from control over one's environment and practical reason to affiliation and emotions, Nussbaum has effectively widened the scope of criteria used to determine whether or not people and communities are impoverished.
Many argue that the capabilities approach is unrealistic because the capabilities of each individual cannot feasibly be measured by the government. The capabilities approach does not need to be measured on an individual basis or a household basis. Instead, it should focus more on the capabilities of communities as a whole. Society actually already measures some key capabilities of communities and compares it to other communities. For example, if Nussbaum's central capability of life is evaluated, society can look at life expectancy in different communities. This slide shows the life expectancy of an individual in San Jose on the left and Baltimore on the right. As you can see, there is a drastic difference. The lowest life expectancy in San Jose is 75 to 78 years, whereas in Baltimore it is 66 years. There may be an underlying cause as to why there is a huge gap between communities. If we dug deeper, we may find that other central capabilities, like bodily integrity, are violated in Baltimore, which contributes to the low life expectancy. If this is true, more programs could be established in order to protect the community, rather than just throwing money at the issue. Another argument that can be made is that the capabilities approach does not capture everyone in poverty. Compared to the OPM, the capabilities approach is capturing the most people who could be in poverty. This approach does exclude some people who lack either capabilities or income, just not both. When using the OPM, these outliers cannot be identified within society, since the OPM does not even consider capabilities as a factor of poverty. By using the capabilities approach, we are able to at least identify these outliers and take them into account when considering poverty.